so much, everyone, for coming through. My name is Admire Mari. I'm an associate professor and head of Department of Communication and Media at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you so much for coming through. I really appreciate your participation in this event. And also I want to thank TikTok for partnering with us for this particular event. Without wasting much of your time, I want just to leave this time to our moderator, Dr. Maud Blose, to take us through the first session for today, and then we will then move on to the next one that will be starting at 1. Thank you so much for coming through, and I really appreciate your coming through, especially students. Thank you so much. I know that you've got so many things in terms of assignments, but also you've just decided to come here. Thank you so much for coming through. All right.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not used to talking to students sitting down. I'm used to, because I'm a lecturer, so I'm used to standing and addressing students. So I feel a little bit confined as I'm sitting down. But anyways, good morning to all of you as our esteemed guest. This morning, it is you who is our esteemed guest and not us, right? Because when we speak about something as crucial as the journey to freedom and democracy in this country, it is something that has a direct impact, and especially on you as young people. So we welcome you this morning. Thank you so much. And here with me, I have our distinguished panel of experts who will be sharing the critical insight into what they think, what their thoughts are around the journey of democracy, freedom and democracy in this country. So this is one of our 4 sessions, this first one, and we do have another one this afternoon, and also 2 more sessions that we have tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining us. Please listen and please take down notes, and feel free to ask questions at the end. You will have that opportunity to ask any question that you want to ask at the end, okay? So enough from me for now. I would like to ask for each of our panelists to kindly introduce themselves. Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mandla Khatebe. I teach in the Department of Strategic Communication. I'm an author, but I'm also the director for the Center for Data and Digital Communication that falls under the School of Communication here at UJ. It's good to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Vern Harris. I'm acting chief executive at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I've worked in the organization for about 20 years, including a stint as Madiba's personal archivist. Thank you.
Yo, that's a lot. Igama lami nguZimasa wakwaVabaza. I'm a socio-economic commentator. I am a struggling entrepreneur, and from time to time I make TikToks.
Thank you so much. So just so that we have an idea as the audience members, if you can just maybe in a line or 2 tell us exactly what it is that you do in your line of work, just so that we have an idea of who is in front of us.
Okay, as I said, I teach. I try to write when I have a chance, whether it's opinion pieces, research pieces, or sometimes I do write books. But I also do a lot of talking on webinars and seminars.
Okay.
Well, as acting chief executive of the foundation, I'm responsible for leading a team which is implementing a mandate Madiba gave us, which is to harness his legacy for the work of creating a just society. Most of the work we do is in the space of combating poverty and inequity. I'm also a visiting professor at the Nelson Mandela University.
What I do is I'm a digital entrepreneur and strategist, primarily. I take stories that are South African, find the data behind them, and make them simpler for people to understand and to connect with them. I think at times stories that are told to us are headline first because of how the news cycle works, And I go in a little bit deeper and I connect the dots for people. And that's what I do publicly. And then the other stuff is I just, I help brands communicate. That's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For those of you that have just joined us, welcome to our first session of 4 sessions. And this session is on the journey to freedom and democracy in this country. We are still on this journey, right? So we haven't yet arrived. I think a lot of us have various experiences that we can speak about, actually, that attest to the fact that the journey is still ongoing. And I'm so happy that we have our esteemed panelists here with us who will speak about what their thoughts are on this journey, especially because we've now heard and learned what are the different things that they are doing in society and why do we specifically have them here. And I so wish that we also had a young person here, maybe one of the students actually, but I'm glad that in the session we will have an opportunity to hear from you guys as well. So Prof. Mandla, let me start with you, right? Your work is focused on data and digital communication. What important trends have you observed about South Africa's democratic path over the years?
Perhaps what I should have done in my introduction was that I'm also an activist,
Yes.
which started in me when I was growing up in Meadowlands, where I was throwing stones as a member of COSAS. I haven't stopped throwing stones. So that's my perspective. It's very important because we're throwing stones under what was a brutal dictatorship under the racist apartheid system in South Africa. We could not have a freedom of speech, a freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and all those sort of things. We could not assemble like this and express our views and our honest opinions about developments. And what the trends that I think are very important that I imagine that have emerged pre and post 1994, our democratic breakthrough, in my view, is that firstly, we have to celebrate the fact that we live in a democracy where we can express ourselves freely using all sorts of platforms that exist. But obviously the major trend that also we need to appreciate that we have as a country is that we've got one of the robust constitutions that is celebrated globally that enshrines these rights for us to be able to express ourselves. But of course, there's quite a number of important institutions that are there that support this democracy, whether it's Chapter 9 institutions that are there to support our democracy. But of course, as a media scholar, what is important for me as a trend is that one, we've got a robust media. Of course, it's commercialization, and therefore its narrative notwithstanding. We must appreciate that. But also we've got a growing number of people who are on digital platforms, such as TikTok, where they freely create and express their views, which was something that was not possible. But having said that, as a last point, I think that we cannot overlook the fact that there are quite a number of challenges that we are faced with. I'm glad that Zimasa is going to talk about some of those issues from a socio-economic perspective. But we've got high levels of poverty, high levels of unemployment, high levels of crime in South Africa. But obviously, you have to locate these issues in the problems of inequality that we find ourselves. There's high level of corruption. Of course, corruption is a global phenomenon, but we are also affected by those things. So these are the trends that we see. They've moved offline, and now they can be found online on digital platforms such as TikTok.
Yes. Thank you for that, Prof. Mandla. I think touching on or piggybacking on what you've just said, so it's clear that we have come far as a country since the apartheid era. But what are some of the ways, I know you've touched on the media a bit, and this goes to anyone here, anyone of the panelists, what are some of the ways that we are here to improve as a society when it comes to our democracy?
I think I'll take the first chunk of this question. I'm going to be a little bit contrarian. Generally, Prof, I think that the one thing that we do as South Africans, and I believe erroneously, is that we use the same rhetoric around our constitution, that it is world famous, it's renowned, it's amazing, etc. It feels to me that the constitution that we have is not a living document that we can look at more constantly and more vigorously as normal people and have a democratic vote as to whether or not the constitution as it stands still captures the ethos that we currently have and want for the future. We understand how, why, and when it was done and why it took the shape that it took when it was written, but the conversation needs to change, especially as a sort of middle-of-the-road type of millennial. I'm born in the 80s, so I know a little bit about the past. Bisho Massacre, I still remember, I was 5 years old, I remember the gunshots. So I kind of understand that world, but I'm also a forward thinker. I think about where we're going as a country, and I say to myself, there are things that fundamentally I believe we're not putting in place in order to have honest and deep conversations about how great really is our constitution. So, and I think that I don't think I was ever given an opportunity, or a lot of the people who are young were given an opportunity to have a say with regards to that. And that comes back to sort of like media positioning, as you maybe touched on. The media in our country is, I believe, in my opinion, very negative about the country, right? They don't serve a patriotic role in giving as much of the positive news or a balanced view of the news as they used to, because I'm a little bit older, so I understand what the news was when I was growing up, and I'd watch it with my grandfather, and we would analyze what it actually means. Versus now, where I am somebody who took up the call to offer a more neutral and a more positive, nuanced approach to news in South Africa, because people are tired of negativity. So that's kind of where I want to set up this conversation from my perspective.
Thank you. So Zamasa, you've touched on patriotism, right? And you are saying that the media is not really playing a much patriotic role in this country. Vern, let me just move to you. What role does civil society play in safeguarding democracy in South Africa, and how can these organizations be supported in their efforts to enhance civic participation? So yes, the media has a role, but then what role does the organizations and also as the people?
Thank you. So let me start by saying safeguarding democracy. I think the role of civil society has to be somewhat different. Is that the harsh reality is that democracy is not working for the great majority of people who call South Africa home. That is the challenge. The challenge is, how do we all, not only civil society, all of us find a way of making democracy work? In terms of civil society specifically, for me, the three big tasks. One is that we need to be doing the deep research and analysis, so that whether we're critiquing the state or we're pointing out the ways in which the private sector still has not come to the party, whether we're talking employment equity or whether we're talking about contributing to meaningful redistribution of wealth, is that we need to be putting hard, comprehensive evidence on the table. When we're making proposals for public policy changes, we're drawing on that deep research. The second one is to be bringing people together, is to find the spaces where across sectors we're able to listen to one another and look for sustainable solutions together. So, you know, I think the social contract that underpins democracy is failing us, and we need to find a different basis on which to find social bonding and work together. The third area, I'll stop here, for me, an important role for civil society is in the realm of ideas, thinking differently, is thinking outside of the box. Because I think You know, when Madiba became president in 1994, the top priority was to make democracy stick. And it has stuck, but we've become stuck, and we have to think differently.
I like the concept of social bonding, and I like that you mentioned that we are all responsible in terms of safeguarding our democracy. And I think for me, especially as young people, I'm counting myself as one of the young people. As young people, I think it is also important to look at when we are given platforms like your TikTok, what is the content that we are putting out there? Why are we putting the content that we're putting out there? What are the intentions or the intentions behind the type of content that we're putting out there? What does it do or what role does it serve in terms of safeguarding our democracy? Do we even think about that as young people, right? So that is just something that I'm just throwing out there to the audience. Zamasa, back to you, sir. Given the significant role that the media plays in shaping public opinion, and I know you spoke about the media earlier on, what responsibilities do platforms like TikTok and traditional media have in supporting democracy and freedom in this country?
That's a very good question. Firstly, I want to say upfront, I really appreciate the opportunities that platforms like TikTok and others offer, because they offer an alternative that I would say with a fair degree of certainty that is not mainstream one, that allows a distribution of thought or opinion around topics. That's another, because if you've ever understood how a story becomes a story and how it hits the front page, you understand that it's got touch points, and there's people that write it, that sub-edit it, that edit it, then it sits down or it gets workshopped, and then they talk about headlines, etc. When you work with words, you understand that a comma, a full stop, a but, a pause means a lot, and it changes the context of a story. We're currently dealing with the story around the building collapse in George, and there's a lot of commas and full stops and pauses and not a lot of information coming out. So a story is being shaped. So a platform like TikTok allows for even citizen journalism to take shape, where people who are closest to the story can take their phones and record and report what's actually going on. You no longer need to wait for a big camera crew to come and say, this is what's happening in your hood, in your township, Ekasi. You are actually a reporter. You're part of the citizenry. You're part of the journalism citizenry that exists there. The other thing is that the negativity that you see in the news has turned a lot of the youth away from the news. Sure. So what you find is that when you find that a platform or a news source is inherently negative, people who were either who are not left nor right, are maybe centrist, they get put off. They say to themselves, but is it really this bad? Right? And that, is it really this bad? That conversation, a lot of people, South Africans, we draw back. It's who we are, and to our detriment, we do it in spaces. We do it by seeding ground. The CBD is an example of that. We leave spaces because we feel, I can't do anything alone, right? And even though we have the opportunity to aggregate our ideas, our activism, we don't do that because maybe we think about family first. Right, and not greater community. So media has a strong role to play, and they've become, and it's a double-edged sword. The media has moved to become this clickbaity institution because they want more money to flow to them, but they've also at the same time closed off a lot of channels. I don't know of a popular or a top news site today that you can go and get an opinion piece for free. Right? So who is shaping opinions? Yeah. So if we can no longer get Prof's opinion, if it's on a particular platform, even though I saw the headline and I don't know the essence of what Prof has written down, then somebody who has access can say, this is what Prof said inside there. So we're suddenly seeing a division and you could almost say a news information apartheid that's taken shape, where we can no longer get the story because the story is behind a 75 rand a month paywall. And then what and where does that lead us to?
Interesting questions. I have so much that I want to say, but then I feel like I'm limited because I still need my job at the end of the day. So I have to be mindful of what I say. I so wish, and my boss is here, so I can't speak, like I want to speak. But you touch on a lot of important things where we do say that this is a journey to freedom and democracy, right? So the journey is still ongoing. And for us, the journey has taken us thus far 30 years. I look at a 30-year-old. Is there a 30-year-old in the audience? Is there anyone who's 30? So I look at a 30-year-old, and in my head, and I'm thinking, but when is this baby going to grow? I can't be a 30-year-old not knowing which direction I'm taking, right? I know, yes, what my parents want me to do and where I'm supposed to be in life. But then if I'm still trying to find myself, trying to figure it out, because I feel like that is where we are now as a country and also as society. There's a lot that you said. And also the fact that we are grateful that we have platforms like TikTok, which enable us to share our opinions, to be free in terms of participating in the engagements and the topics that are of national interest as well. But then we also need to be mindful of the fact that then this means that we are contributing in being storytellers ourselves. And I guess for me the question is, I should be asking myself as a young person, what story am I telling, right? So I think that is just one of the things. Prof. Mandla, you've been quiet. Looking at the statistical trends, they do show that there's a concern in terms of the low rate of youth participation in democratic processes, such as voting in this country. We've been seeing a lot of those. And I think even mainstream media as well, they've touched a lot on there's a low participation in terms of the youth in this country. So what are the main factors contributing to this disengagement among young people?
Well, there's quite a number of factors that you have to consider. But I think that the starting point, I deliberately called it a democratic breakthrough because it's not democracy. 1994 was a democratic breakthrough that gave us an opportunity to work towards democracy and freedom. So to assume that after 30 years there will be freedom and democracy in South Africa, I think it's a bit ambitious.
Sure.
But it's an opportunity to work towards an inclusive society. And at the heart of that is how that society organizes itself, and at the heart of that macroeconomic politics, which could be the debate for another day. Coming back to your question, there is a book that we will be launching in June, titled The Public Sector Communication in the Digital Age. In that book, one of our colleagues, Professor Karabo Sito Kaunda, writes a very interesting chapter on the influence voter turnout, where she analyzes the IEC's stakeholder communication strategy. And what comes out from the chapter are very important facts. The fact of the matter is that there is 14 million unregistered young people in South Africa. And if those people can vote alone, form their own party and vote, they can be a governing party. 14 million unregistered people. But now let's come to the statistics are very interesting that 49% of all eligible voters in South Africa in 2019 voted. So there's 51% that decided, I will stay at home, it's not worth it. Now let's bring it to the youth a little bit, because this is what Professor Sito Kaunda finds for us, is that 19% of the young people between the ages of 18 and 19 who were eligible to vote. Only 15% of them voted. A huge army of young people don't go to vote. She breaks these numbers down quite a lot. I mean, you'll see that the fact of the matter is that young people don't vote. Of course, amongst the factors that she finds, as a deterrent factor is that there is parties are led by an aging population which cannot relate and connect to the young people.
Yeah.
And one of the suggestions she makes in the chapter is that the IEC should not see voter education as an occurrence that must happen during elections. So it must be an ongoing program to ensure that there's voter education and people understand why they need to vote. But if you are not going to connect voting to the socio-economic conditions, the material basis of the existence of a human being, which brings you to the macroeconomic policies of the country, you are not going to be able to touch the issues. There's a number of issues, particularly on the political economy of communication platforms. I mean, when you speak of the media, for example, you have to talk to the issues of its concentration. South African media is concentrated, it's owned by the elites, you know, and therefore you need to think about the alternative media. But we tend to think of the digital media platform as an alternative. They are not, because they are also controlled by global Western conglomerations whose main purpose, how they make money, is to mine your data, take your data. Where does the data that TikTok, Google, Facebook goes?
Yeah.
That's where the money is. And I think there are experts in the room, I don't want to call them by the names, who write a lot about these things. So to talk of citizen journalism in those platforms, yes, important, but I think there are deeper politics that we'll have to unpack when you talk about those things. All those things influence the reality of the young people, where they find themselves and why they don't vote.
That's true. That's yo. It's a lot, guys, and I think we are, as much as there's a saying that when you point one hand to other people, three more fingers are pointing back at you. So with these three fingers pointing back at us, my not even question as such, but then I guess my comment is we also need to be mindful of only engaging in such discussions and having such seminars only when it is leading up to the election. So I think in terms of us striving to have a democratic country, it calls for all of us to actively participate in ensuring that we do honestly have an active democracy or democratic environment in this country. Zamasa, with the upcoming elections, so what have you been noticing in the social media? Like, what are the trends in terms of the users as we approach the upcoming elections? What are you seeing?
Firstly, we don't have Cambridge Analytica type interference yet. So normally in the last 2 weeks you'll start seeing the bots, etc. Yes. But we know which political parties use bots, but that's for another day. What we're seeing is not enough, and it's not enough because I think at times this election cycle is different. Let me explain. I think South Africans in the previous election cycles, there was a reason to be more active and involved socially and on places and platforms like social media, because you could see the next chapter and you could dream about what's going to come next. So normally the promise of a future gets people off their backsides. Now, when you suddenly are faced with a present that is untenable from an economic perspective, from a socio-economic perspective, from a societal interaction perspective, you find that people tune out again. Remember, South Africans, we like to pull back. Yeah. They'd rather not, right? So the loudest mouths and the people who might not have the most information are the ones that are still on the platform having a conversation and a say. So we find that in this election cycle, it's actually been very quiet. Other than the normal discourse and the back and forth punching of political parties, the citizenry hasn't really taken key topics to task and to unpack them. I dare say if I asked how many people have read any of the political party manifestos, it wouldn't be a lot.
Yeah.
But they've also done a terrible job of making those publicly available in formats that people can consume easily. And that in itself, I mean, the biggest political story right now is an advert of a flag burning in an election cycle where we need to know where the country is going, right? But we'd rather be comfortable in the present and have that conversation because we want to defend the flag, and immediately after that you tune off and you're not civically active the very next day.
Why do you think that is, though?
I think it's easier for South Africans. South Africans have, I'm going to say something. South Africans have subcontracted their agency to others. We do it willingly, we do it every day. We take our agency and we give it to other people. And we let them do with it what they will. Whether it's to go to places of organizations, maybe churches, not attacking anyone's church, civic organizations, we go there to give away our power. Not necessarily to combine it with others so that we can do things that can actually change our environment.
Again, why do we do that? Like, I'm trying to get
There's a psyche. There's a psyche that exists in South Africa post 94 that is, I'm going to say, without any actual data, but with a feeling in the South Africa that I grew up in, that we became very much mentally demilitarized. So anybody who shouts a little bit louder, who speaks a little bit louder, most people go, oof. And then some people will go, yes, 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 you're talking for us. But no one joins in chorus, right? We have million man marches that have like 500 people for key topics in this country, right? And I just did a piece recently around how universities are funded in endowment funds, right? And I took it back to Fees Must Fall. That was the very first time most people understood that universities, some of them, sit on billions of rands. That technically is money they can use, but technically it's money that they can't use. Yeah. There's a lot we don't understand about South Africa and how it actually works as a fabric. And it demoralizes people when they think things are not happening, but they don't know why. They don't truly know why things aren't happening. So South Africans draw back. And I don't think this election cycle has kicked off. Maybe in the last 2 weeks or so, you'll start to see a lot more community engagement, etc., from the parties, but that they were normally going to do that. What about us, the citizenry, who are maybe undecided? What about those people who are registered but are not necessarily thinking about going and voting? Right? I had conversations with friends of mine who were, they're like, yeah, but I registered in the Eastern Cape, because I don't know Banza Votanjan. And I said to them, but like, my sister, you can actually just vote nationally. You can vote anywhere. Yeah. So yes, it could be education, but at the same time, I just don't think we're switched on right as South Africans for the future that we say and we think we want.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, just to add, to say that there's a lot of information that is out there, but there isn't really that much knowledge that is out there, because there's a difference between the two, right? And I think also as South Africans, especially us as young people, how do we filter out that information to actually get that crux or that crucial knowledge, that actionable knowledge that will serve us as young people, right? And for me, in order for me to complain, I need to have done something first. I need to have tried something. I need to have engaged in something for me to be like, but I tried this, I tried that, I tried everything else, and now I have a right to blame somebody. And I would be very scared if there's anybody in this room who has not registered. But looking at everyone's faces, I know we all have registered, and we are all going to the polls, because the power, guys, is in our hands, right? Because we cannot be having a situation, and I'm afraid to say what I'm about to say now, but I'll say it anyways, because it is so sad that we continue to be governed by people who make policies and laws which will not directly affect them. Chances are they won't even be there in that future that they are deciding for ourselves. So I think it is high time for us as young people to wake up and really cross that X and know what is the meaning of that X in the upcoming elections, right? So thank you so much for that, Zemasa. Vern, what are the biggest challenges that South Africa face? I feel like we face a whole lot of challenges. But what are some of the key challenges that this country faces today in terms of maintaining and enhancing a democratic process? We've seen there's a lot of them that we can speak about, but what are the key ones?
Yeah, for me, top priority would be to find a way of effectively redistributing wealth.
Yes.
We've avoided difficult issues like land. It's time for us to grasp the nettle and get on with that difficult work now. A second one I would name is we need public servants who are passionate, who believe in what they're doing, and because too many structures of the state are dysfunctional or barely functional. We need a functioning state. In terms of the private sector, it really is time for the private sector to come to the party. You know, in so many ways, the private sector has been the driver of a very resilient white supremacy. And that fundamental transformation, it has to happen now. And then lastly, I would say that all of us have to look in the mirror.
Yes.
And confront the extent to which we as a society have become corrupted. It's easy to talk about state capture and point fingers or point at the private sector, but all of us are implicated in this. And that becomes a major challenge. I think it's a moral challenge, but it's also a challenge of our social culture and of our journey moving forward.
Yeah. And when you speak of the redistribution of wealth, it is a touchy topic, right? Which affects just about the majority of South Africans. But I don't want to get into that one. I'll hold on that one for now. And I know that we'll have questions from the audience. Prof. Mandla, your role, in your role as the director of the University of Johannesburg Center for Data and Digital Communication, how do you assess the impact of digital media on democratic engagement in this country?
Well, I think there are 3 points that I want to mention quickly that I think all of us need to take into account when we talk about digital communication and democracy. The first point, which colleagues have slightly touched on, is the disinformation and misinformation, otherwise known as fake news. Now, one of the biggest points that we must acknowledge is that South Africa has got one of the highest internet penetration in the continent. It has the highest number of social media users. And in that event, there is a huge number of people who are using social media for democratic purposes, but there is a huge danger of misinformation and disinformation. And one way that media is affected is that there's a lot of threats that are happening there. The second point that is very important for me is that there is a danger if we don't, and I think one of the key issues we need to really think about is the regulation of digital media platforms, in particular social media platforms, because there is a growing threat of surveillance there, but also I've spoken about data extraction, data colonialism or data imperialism, whatever word you want to use it. And if you don't regulate these things, as Africans will continue to be tailing behind the West. I mean, if you look at the EU and the US, they've been very quick to ensure that there is regulation. But the third point that we're beginning to see is that there's a reversal of how AI, artificial intelligence in particular, could be used in these platforms to ensure that it is used to protect and consolidate democracy. There's quite a number of examples that one can use. For example, how this platform can be used to counter deep fakes and all those sort of things. There are, in some platforms, this could be used for AI for social good. That can be used. So those are some of the trends that we are observing that are emerging, that have absolutely no doubt that are going to impact our democracy. I'm glad that the Cambridge Analytica situation has not, we haven't experienced it yet in our elections, but I have no doubt that someone is trying something out there.
Okay, Prof, maybe just for the benefit of those who are not aware of the Cambridge Analytics, can you just, in a line or two, just so that we are all on the same page?
It's basically how this organization, do they still exist? I think they closed down. They closed down. That they were used to influence, largely on Facebook, creating bots and all those sort of fake information to influence elections. It was a 2016 elections in the US, I think. So it was basically that situation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Prof. And still speaking about digital media platforms, Zamasa, I'll come back to you. In your view, what specific roles do you think the youth can play in driving and deepening democratic institutions here in this country?
I think it starts with being a little bit more aware of how things work from a public as well as a private perspective. I think that is one of the things that I vigorously try to make a lot of people aware of with sort of like my content and what I put out there, because South Africans don't read. The devil is always in the detail, and something as simple as saying to yourself, take time out, read the state of the province report, right? See how much money is moving around Gauteng, and also just do simple math, simple calculations as to whether or not things are happening in the way that they're meant to or were said to be. You'll find that something very, very simple. I was reading the report, the Eastern Cape's report on their budget, and there's a line item that says Premier's office, and it has 2 billion rand. And I asked myself, why does the Premier's office have 2 billion rand? It was more than other things, like more than sport, more than... I said, why does the Premier's office need to have 2 billion rand? We need to question things for what they are. Yeah. These things are written down. For most young people will say that things aren't happening, but they're not necessarily reading. Whether it's the just energy transition, just read. Read, and you see that South Africa shouldn't be closing down coal-fired power stations because, one, we didn't create the problem, and two, we still aren't the problem because we're still below our levels. And then you got to ask yourself why. Why is it that a lot of these things are happening right in front of you? And this is not a conspiracy realm. It's an actual thing that's written down on paper, right? There is a plan to say, we will do X, Y, Z, etc. Then you do that. What I think is key for young people to maybe grasp, once you know, what is the next step? I think the democratization of said knowledge is the next step. We have better conversations knowing that the people around us have the same information. Then I don't have to explain to you how a particular budget was either spent correctly or incorrectly. We then have a conversation about whether or not it's doing the right thing. So those are the conversations that young people need to have. But we've also got to then have another conversation about how there is a natural sort of sidelining of young people in civic and public as well as even corporate institutions. Because the data shows us, and I think the prof was mentioning a study that I might have bumped into as well, that says most young people become politically and civically involved post 30. That's why 30 is such an important age.
Yes.
Because one, you're thinking about buying a house.
Yes.
Two, you likely have a small family now and things affect you. And you want to know why they affect you. So then on the basis of that, you say, oh, but I don't think things are working for me. So therefore, mandis chinja izinto. So there is an over simplification of the youth not voting conversation, because the youth at that stage in their life they're not faced with challenges that create the conditions for them to become aggressively politically involved.
So what do you think that we can do as a society to help empower the youth to actually engage and actively participate?
There's a very simple thing you do. You literally go into parliament and you say 30% of representation must be below 35. Done. 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 Tomorrow, you're going to suddenly start to have, because parliament sits with a large number of backbenchers who do nothing in those subcommittees, who do nothing even as chairs of committees, backbenchers. We had a minister of finance who supposedly had all the qualifications in the world, but had done absolutely nothing and was a complete backbencher. Now, to put a 25-year-old person in a similar role, that person starts to learn the process, starts to learn and understand that there are things called the Hansard. That is a record of all conversations ever had in our parliament. And you go back and you say to yourself, who has been progressively, or which party has been progressively voting for things, or putting things, or laws, or suggesting that white papers, green papers, etc., that we go in a particular direction? Who's been shooting things down? Who has been proposing things? And how do things actually work? So those are the key things. Because if you said to me, out of the 400 people that are there, 100 are young people, I'd be like, okay, there's a chance.
Yeah.
There's a chance.
Yeah. Yes, Vern.
Just to come in on that one is, one of the joys of being in government in that first administration, 94 to 99, was the extent to which not only activists were coming into the public service, but also young people.
Yes.
Our first DG in arts and culture, Roger Jardine, was 29 years old. And so it's not only public representation in parliament, it's also in government structures.
That's true. That is true.
But if I can just add, perhaps this could be my parting shots on the question of the youth. If you look at the key historical moments in South Africa, you can go back to the 1973 strikes, which were driven by young people. Those were the first major strikes after the formalization of apartheid. If you look at the Black consciousness movement, these were the young people who were sort of, I'm talking about 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds. If you look at and how these young people will push for 1976 uprising, and how these young people leave the country, I'm talking 16, 17-year-olds. They did not negotiate. These were the people who were at the forefront. If you look at the young lions of the 80s, the South African Youth Congress that gave us the Roger Jardines of this world, these young people were not negotiating. If you look at it, the fees must fall, well, I've got my views about fees must fall. Maybe it's conservatism catching up with me. Maybe age is caught up with me eventually. But these are young people. So for me, I don't think young people must negotiate, want 30% in parliament. These young people they joined NK. They were the freedom fighters that gave us this freedom. They never negotiated that we want 30% to be in the ANC, PAC, we want 30%. They pushed the boundaries. Yeah, these were young kids. These were kids, man, if you think about it. 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds. carrying big arms. So the point is that young people must rise, young people must reclaim their agency, but you are not going to get freedom by trying to negotiate quotas. Young people must stand up and drive and change the country as they have always done. It was the Nelson Mandelas and the Sobukwes of this world who radicalized the ANC in the 1940s. So young people have always risen up. And I have no doubt that these young people will eventually rise up and take this country forward.
Can I just quickly jump in before you come in, Chair? I believe that revolutions of the past needed that. The revolutions of now and the future need funding, backing, and money.
Okay.
So the expectation that young people will do what was done in the past today is, I believe, erroneous. I believe it's incorrect because the change that maybe could have been done through disruption in the past is a change that we don't need now. We need structural change. We need legislative change. And that's the fight we should be having. But that requires money.
I think what I'm picking up from the floor is that the point is, it is us, the young people, who are the solution, right? We can name and probably even shame a lot of problems that we see and that we encounter personally or otherwise in this country, but we are the problem. Yes, the environment might have changed and the resources might have changed, so obviously now our approach as well obviously ought to change, right? And I also feel like I don't want us to talk a lot about young people as if young people are not here, right? So now I will pause, because I feel like it is very important that we hear from young people themselves in the audience. If you have, actually, let me open it up to the floor. What questions, what comments, anything that is on your mind that you want to share with us? Remember, we are at the University of Johannesburg. We are in an academic space, right? We are in a safe space, and we are in exactly a space where debates is actually encouraged. So what do you have? What is on your mind? What questions do you have? Your questions can be directed to anybody here on the floor, or even comments, or even if you disagree with some of the comments that have been made here by the panelists, please, this is your moment. Questions. We will have a roving mic. Yeah. Any questions from the floor? Please just raise your hand and then we'll pass the mic so that you can be audible. Awesome. I want to say an Imbogodo is starting, but I know the term Imbogodo also has a bit of problems as well, but yes, please go ahead. Your name, please tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Samara.
Awesome.
I'm from the Department of Strategic Communications. I just wanted to get your guys' opinions on, there's a lot of talk among the youth and people our age who are talking about how they feel like in this elections, there's no hope. So a lot of young people aren't even voting at all. So what is your view on hope and the role it plays in this elections?
There has to be hope. There will always be hope, and because if there's no hope, there's no future. And if you want to be hopeless, is to not to appreciate the progress that has been made and the challenges. And in my view, the fact of the matter that we've got a very contested election, that's for me, there's hope. Because I can tell you that I grew up in a situation where we used to be shot at with rubber bullets, actually with live ammunition, for just trying to gather in a room like this. So for most of us who come from that generation, we see a lot of hope that people can freely express themselves. People can say whatever they want to say about the president of the country, and no one gets arrested. People can write whatever they want to write, no one gets arrested. That is why there's every incentive for young people to be actively involved in politics so that they can craft the future of this country. Because the young people, I think everyone, I mean, I don't want to repeat because it has become cliche that the future of this country lies in the hands of young people. Absolutely, there is hope, and young people must get actively involved and shape that future.
I'm going to steal a line from Game of Thrones and say that chaos is a ladder. In this very much chaotic time in South Africa, chaos offers political opportunity. It also offers economic opportunity. We need a lot more people to be looking for it, right? And taking action. There's a lot of funding in South Africa that goes unused, and for various reasons. One, I've found in my limited experience that in business that South Africans don't like paperwork. Generally, we don't like paperwork. We don't want, but at the same time, we're not putting in place things like simple digitization processes to allow for less paperwork to be done. But other than that, I think that the greatest hope of the youth and South Africa and everyone else is the middle class. It's people that have maybe a little bit more, but don't have as little that they don't feel that anything could be done. Because there's a difference, right? It's the smallest gap between being middle class and being poor, a very small gap. And a lot of times, those are the people that are always head down, having to work, but they're the ones that could actually affect a lot of change, right? And you see it in communities that want to do things. You see that there are residents associations, etc. When trash isn't picked up, there's an avenue and a way to fix or remedy those situations. The thing with the youth is that you sit in institutions like this that gather a lot of like-minded people together. It starts in institutions like this, where you're able to find like-minded people behind one vision, one goal. The goal doesn't have to be to change South Africa, right? It's to change your immediate environment. And if 1,000 other groupings, just like yourself, do the exact same thing, you're able to affect change. Simple case in point, the Broederbond. The Broederbond was an organization that was massive, did a lot of things, terrible, some good, for the Afrikaners, depending on which side of the fence you are. But they worked through the church system. Every Sunday, we're going to meet, we're going to have church, then after that, we're going to discuss the issues that affect our area. We need to distribute the power of change in South Africa and not centralize it. So the youth must not necessarily fall into the past, into the God complexes of the past. It must be decentralized, just like the blockchain. No one person must own the narrative, but we must decide what we want the future to be, and in your corner of the world, you're going to change the situation.
So let me respond to the question as a very old person. Hope is not enough. And I don't have much hope that I'm going to live to see the South Africa of Madiba's dreams. But I do have a belief that fighting for that South Africa matters. Even if we have to wait another 30 years before we get there. Thanks.
And I think if I may just also add, when you speak of hope, for me, my hope is, I look at you guys as young people, I look at my students in class, and for me, that is the hope that I hold. I look at, even in terms of the discussions that we have in class, and even the one-on-one conversations that I have with some of the students, I look at how strong you are as students. And I feel like in terms of that hope, it's not something that ought to be external, and it's not something that we have to tell young people, you must have hope. But then it has to be something that is internalized, something that you have to feel first and foremost yourself, and be, like the saying goes, be that change that you want to see, right? I look at you guys and I'm like, the country actually is in our future. Maybe I might not even be there in that future, but then the future of this country is really in good hands. And when Zamasa says that seminars like this are gathering like-minded people, yes, they're good and everything else, but then after the seminar, my question is, then what? Or so what? With all this information and this knowledge and these discussions that we're having, what am I doing about it, right? So the fact that we have probably 1,000 people gathered in a particular environment, what this means for me is that there are pretty much 1,000 communities that are represented. So what this basically says is, I, as a person who would have been an attendee in that session, I have to go back, plow back the knowledge that I've learned, and I have to implement change where I come from. The sad reality is that when we think that we have made it in life, we move away from the communities that we come from. And we don't ask ourselves, who then is going to implement or plow change in those communities, right? So, but yes, guys, Samara, you guys are the hope that we hold every single day, that makes us wake up in the morning every single day, right? Thank you so much for that great question. Do we have, yes, there is another hand.
Hi, my name is Alu. My question is, you made a statement that we move away from communities that we come from, but you forgot to mention that the communities that we come from will move away because there are no resources. You can't just go there and you will stay there. There's nothing to stay there for. And also when we say everything is laid on the youth, some people are not exposed to these seminars, for example. Some of my classmates are not here, they have classes, we can't attend some of the seminars, they're not exposed to this information. For me to be here, I'm privileged because from people that come from my communities, they can't afford to be here. Only a few manage to be here. And these few people cannot be given a responsibility to change this system because systems are built. We are built to not enter in this system. And when we do enter, we have little to no power to change the backgrounds where we come from. So that's just my
Like, is that a counter to, okay, maybe just a quick one on that. So there's one hand, 1, 2, 3 hands that have gone up. You are right, Alu. It is very difficult for us to go back to where we come from, to places where there are no resources. But now imagine a situation where all of us are moving away from those places. Who is responsible to bring about those changes and provide those resources in those places? What about the people who are not fortunate like you and I to be sitting in environments like this, who are still trapped back in the communities that we come from? I mean, I think for me, and this is just my opinion, right? My opinion is that we tend to want to change the world. We can't change the world, right? We can't. We cannot change the world. We don't have that ability and that power to change the world. But we can only change, even if it's like a minute space that we are in. I think just by that, like a mustard seed, just that smallest change that you're about to bring up, that is still considered change. But I totally agree with you because another person can then add, but I've moved away from the conscious because of the crime, and if now I'm perceived as a middle class, I'm now deemed as, oh, so she's made it or she's got money, and now there's crime, there's hijacking, there's all of those things that force us to move away from those communities. So I think, again, these are some of the things that we really need to look into, Prof. Mandla, when we're doing our research. It ought not to be research that we do and it's published, we pick our KPIs and then it collects data. But it has to be research that brings about changes in the societies that we come from. We owe it, right? We owe it to those societies where we come from. There was a hand, yes. There was 3 hands, yes. You can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Sandile. I come from Val. So I'm a counter on what she said. talking about communities. So, I grew up in a middle class family in the townships. So, what I've realized is that each and every sector, we have someone to represent us, right? So, that someone, as they are representing us, they're supposed to like bring a change. So, us as youth, when you try to engage and be part of what is happening, I've realized that in most cases, we do not win. No matter how much we try to actually engage ourselves and actually collect ourselves and be together in building a better future for us and the others that are coming after us, I realized that there's too much instability within the country itself, within the country itself. And I would also say that change has to come from an individual. Each and every individual has to actually tell themselves that I want to bring change. So that little change that you bring, it can actually bring positivity to someone else. And that positivity can be spread amongst everyone. So once someone is negative, it also spreads negativism to other people. That's why we'll find out that we are not able to actually move forward. We are always stagnated in the same place. Yes, we will vote this year, but again and again, we get the same results.
Let's vote and let's see if we'll get the same result. But I'm very happy that you're saying that we will vote. We will vote, actually, so I'm happy about that one. There's two more hands, and then we need to end.
Good morning, everyone. So my question is directed to Prof. Mandla. One of the things that make the youth believe that we have not reached the journey of being a democratic country is because we have institutions that are not fully living up to their expectations. They are not serving the purpose that they are supposed to serve. So I just wanted to ask from you personally, what do you think, what strategies do you think can be implemented for the institutions that we have in place to serve their purpose and combat corruption? Yeah, so that we get to a point where we fully see that we are a democratic country.
Yes, I think let's take one last question and then all of take the one last question for the lady in the front. Yes.
Hi, my name is Tracy. Basically, it's not a question from me, but it's to add on what other audience has said. From my perspective, is that for the youth not to vote and to participate in politics and stuff, it is because, as she was saying, we have a hope. But then to see our government to do more corruption and, like, for example, if there are a lot of graduates who are unemployed. So if you are a graduate who is unemployed, sitting at home and everything, then there'll be a program that it needs to happen on that village or an area. Already on the municipality, there are people already who has that position already. So if I'm gonna put my CV there, it's gonna be useless or it's hopeless because they already have their own people. Just like, for example, EPWP, the one that works in some areas. You may say that, okay, people, they can announce that, okay, there's opportunities for a community or for everyone living in a city or in an area, but they already have their own people who are there. That's why, like, the youth, like, loses hope in voting. That, like, what's the point? Because there's no change. I'm unemployed. I've been unemployed. So what's the youth, like, the government doing towards us? I don't know if I do.
No, you're making a lot of sense. You're making a lot of sense, Tracy. And what you touch on is something that is very important and sadly something that is a reality in some of the parts of in this country, right? Where we speak of cadre deployment, right? Where as a qualified unemployed graduate, and you do qualify even for that position, but you know that you're not going to get it because there's other candidate or a candidate that has already been eyed for the position. I had a personal experience around that, but we can take it outside. We'll speak about that. It is so sad, but just one thing that I want to highlight to you is that, and caution the young people as well, even by not voting, that is still a vote. You know, I think that we need to remind ourselves of that, that even if I decide that, oh, because things have been so bad and it's not going to change anyways, by me sitting and not exercising my vote, that is still a vote. Because still, maybe, who knows, maybe it would have taken my vote to change it. Just that one vote, right? So I encourage all of us, please go out in numbers on the 29th and cast our vote, regardless of what the results are going to be. Eventually, the change that we want, we shall see today.
Thank you very much, Program Director. There is, I think the issue of voter apathy is a global problem. So it's not a South African problem. Young people globally are beginning to find other forums and platforms where they express themselves, whether they get issues of climate justice, so it's not like a problem in South Africa. So it's important to always put perspective. The second thing too, and for me, what is crucial, especially for young people or all of us who are at the universities, to understand how the society is structured. And because it is through the understanding of the structure that we can make a meaningful contribution. So who are the people who control the economy and how they came to being? We cannot ignore that. And how is that economy linked to the global economic system? You cannot ignore that reality, because you can talk about all these things, but if you are unable to connect that to that reality and to understand the systemic nature of the problem, the structural nature of the problem, you may not be able to resolve the problem. So the issues of how are institutions that are there that are supporting or are supposed to support democracy are failing is precisely because in most instances lack of participation and active participation. I do support the fact that participate where you are. Participate in student politics, participate in your community where you come from. It is always important to participate because I can never emphasize our history, because our history determines where we are. That if the young people of 1976 did not stand up and waited for someone to give them funding and all those things, we would still be oppressed today. So it is important that you stand up and you get actively involved. It is through that participation, that activity, that you'll be able to resolve the problem. But understand how the community, the society is structured. Who are the people who control the means of production, and how is that wealth in society distributed? And all those issues are quite important, because then you become informed to make decisions and to influence and impact society in a meaningful way without just being emotional. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, one last comment.
I know we need to finish. I was listening to Prof, and he got my my quirkiness going. But it's also the youth of 1976 that's in power.
Okay, we should take this one outside.
Yes. There is a book I wrote, The Lost Prince of the ANC. And in that book, you'll read that book, because you'll understand some of the mistakes that were made. And I can tell you that it's not the youth of 76 that is in power. Actually, they are on the periphery, most of them.
All the answers are there in the book, right? Unfortunately, I'm gonna be fired, right? So I so wish we had the whole day for this discussion, but unfortunately we have to end it here for now. So this is just our discussion on the journey to freedom and democracy. We still have our second session taking place from 1 o'clock, the same venue. And that one is on responsible digital citizenry during elections, especially because all of us are, we are digital citizens, right? And we're tech-savvy individuals. So please, I do encourage all of us to come back for that session. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel, but more so than anything else, thank you to you guys. We might be ending the session now, but then we are still going to be available if you guys want to have one-on-one with any one of our panel members. Thank you so much and have an